All right. Welcome back to another show of Usapang Musiko. And this is, wow, our 50th episode. Thank you for always supporting my channel, whether it's podcasts, tutorials, covers, live streams, and all. Thank you so much for everyone who keeps on watching and consuming the content that I uh, give out. And hopefully, you get a lot of insights. You learn something new that you could use in your everyday life, not just, of course, as a musician, but in all aspects of your life as well. Okay, so on today's episode, we'll be talking about uh, why are there more marching bands or wind orchestras compared to, let's say, symphony orchestras or string orchestras in general in the country. No? And if you want to share your insights as well, feel free to do so down in the comment section below. We'll try to read some of your answers as well. And also, uh, please do subscribe to my YouTube channel and also follow me on all my socials. Of course, this podcast will be available on Anchor and all major podcast platforms. So to start things off, when we talk about marching bands or wind orchestras, I mean, in the provinces, there's really a ton of them, no? Here in my hometown in Imus, Cavite, I think when you go to the city center, like where there's near Imus Cathedral, there's like I think two or three bands situated within the vicinity of the city center, no? And I think in other towns as well, there's really a rich, sorry, rich band culture here in the country. And as Filipinos, no, we really love our music, and we see a lot of bands, no, everywhere when there's like celebrations, fiestas like that. Also, when there are funerals, birthday parties, sometimes, especially if the people uh, celebrating are also part of the band, there's a lot of marching bands and wind orchestras that join in with celebrating, no, different events in the country, no. So why is it that with a lot of marching bands and wind orchestras, there's only a handful of string orchestras or orchestras in general with the string section? No, the sorry, the formal orchestras that you see on stage, that perform regularly in different parts of the country, and of course in different theaters and halls. Okay, so what is actually the difference between the two? No, basically, the wind orchestra came from the standard orchestras with the strings. No, it just so happened that string instruments are really sensitive when it comes to, uh, going places. No? So we see a lot of marching bands, diba? They go from one place to another, out in the heat, out in the sun, sometimes even through rain and, through the harshness of the weather, but are still, their instruments are still playable. The problem with a lot of the string instruments, is that they're made of wood, and wood absorbs water, even though it's varnished, even though, you know it's already another entity. It's not just wood, no, but it's really very, very sensitive, no. Stringed instruments are literally the most sensitive instruments in the whole orchestra, no. uh just a difference in humidity could cause damages, no. A difference in temperature can do a lot more harm. But for example, if you have a trumpet, diba, it doesn't really adjust that much with heat. It doesn't really adjust that much with cold, with high humidity or high temperatures as well, no. So I think that is really one of the main factors why there's not a lot of string orchestras or orchestras in general, because of that section, no, because of the string section. It's kind of funny because I'm a string player, and you know, but I think it's really the main point, no, because the only difference is that in a wind orchestra, the string parts are played by other instruments uh in the winds. Like, for example, the clarinets, I think, play the violin parts, the saxophones play the viola parts or the cello parts as well, and the tuba, I think, plays the bass parts. So I think they just spread it around because, again, it's more economical. It's easier to actually start a marching band just because of the upkeep of the instruments, no? Because I have a lot of friends who are really playing in different marching bands and all, no, even before getting into the conservatory, and then after graduating they're still playing for their respective hometown bands because that's where their musical journey started, no. But their stories are really quite nice, no, because a string player to be playing at a young age, you would have to go through several instruments, right? Like for me, for example, I started around 6 years old. My first violin was actually bigger than what should have been prescribed to me. So I think it was a one half size, but it should have been one fourth, or it was three-fourth size because it was an antique violin given to my parents. And then that was what I started using. I mean, I'm a big kid, but you still need the proper sizing in order for us to use to play properly. So what ended up happening was my parents brought me another one. So I had to downsize when I was starting out. So I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's either one fourth or one half that I went to. And then as I grew older, I think before I reached a full size violin, I already played with two or three instruments before reaching a full size. And then when I reached my full size instrument, I have already changed, I think, 4 to 5 times. So, you know, the old instruments I cannot be using again just because of the size. So it's either I should pass it down to another person who can use it, or no one else will use it. I could just sell it, I think. But the problem with my instruments was they were flooded. So every small instrument that I had was broken, literally. So yeah. So the upkeep, no? Because I think in marching bands or wind orchestras, what they do is they look at you, and then they assign an instrument that is fit for you. For example, I think a lot of my trombone player friends said that they got into the trombone because they were tall and lanky. They have long arms, so they were put to play the trombone because they were long. Now, for people who were shorter, they would go and play the trumpet. And the same thing, when you are a little bit taller, you'll go with the flute, no? But if you're a little bit smaller, they'll give you like a piccolo, no, which is a smaller flute with a higher range. So something like that. So you could actually adjust to the instruments that needs to be used. It's not size specific for your height and age, but if you could fit into it, diba? It's easier to just move around people, no? Versus if you want to play a violin and you are like 4 or 5 years old or 6 years old, and the orchestra doesn't have that. Of course, you have to buy your own. No, what if you don't have uh, extra funds to buy your own instrument? That would be a problem. So that's one thing. No, because a lot of bands uh, loan or share their instruments with people who want to learn. No, so they have a lot of inventory that they could share with band members. No, even if they're younger, but you have to commit. No, that's the thing about the band culture in the Philippines. It's really rich. It's actually quite nice to see, diba? That people who want to study these types of instruments have an opportunity too, as long as they commit and they do their job as well. No, now I think for people who don't have, I think they said if you don't have teeth, you'll be assigned to play percussion instruments. No, I don't know if it's a joke or if it's true, but that's what a lot of them said. No, if you don't have good teeth, because of course when you're gonna use a mouthpiece, it needs to have a good seal. So kung bungal ka ng bata, they would assign you to play snare drum, cymbals, or something like that. So again, the difference between the band and an orchestra is just the string section. No, so it's not like it's a lower type of music. It's not like that. They're very, very fairly equal. It's just that I think it's more of a necessity to be able to get all wind orchestras, diba? To be able to play. Because again, strings are really sensitive instruments. They need a lot of maintenance and they need a lot of uh what do you call this? Repairs, maintenance. Yeah, maintenance. Like for example, the standard rehair of a bow is like once every 2 years, even if the hairs aren't falling out, just because you have to keep it uh the friction with between the bow and the strings correct, no? So it's really a high upkeep instrument, like because for a trumpet, no, I think the only thing you need is your instrument, a cloth to wipe it down, and valve oil, no? I mean there's other things, but that's with that setup, you're good to go. But with the violin, you need the violin, you need the bow, you need rosin, you need cleaning cloths, and you need a set of strings all the time. Diba? So, personally, I've been teaching a lot of students, some less fortunate students from uh, uh, IMUS, no, with IMUS Youth String Society, and the major problems that we encounter is sizing, no, because of course when the kids start out young, and the thing is, if they start very young, you need all sizes available. But what if you have three kids, but you only have two one-fourth size instruments. So you can give a one-half size instrument to the other. So you really have to, balance out what type of instrument you're gonna buy. And of course, you really need to take care of those instruments. No, tuning is hard. No, unlike with I know with a brass instrument. No, with uh with a woodwind instrument. No, you can tune it. No, even if it's a little bit out of tune, you can still play because all the intervals will still remain the same. No, unlike for the violin, no, or a cello, for example, even though the tuning is a little bit more stable on a cello, you still have to tune it properly, all four strings every time you're gonna use it. So it's really a headache, to be honest. If you're teaching a lot of young kids who are starting out, and then like the band set up wherein they're teaching like a group session every time. The thing is, just tuning an instrument would take a lot of your time if you're a string player who's trying to teach a lot of students at one go. That's really one of the big problems why. And I totally understand why there's not a lot of orchestras, especially for young children, because another thing is the steep learning curve of the instrument. Again, you're not just focused on the left hand, you're also focused on the right hand. Bowing and stopping the strings are two different things, and it's not like you could already play good repertoire at the beginning. Sometimes it takes years to just develop the certain skills that you need. So in order for you to build an orchestra, let's say a community orchestra, you would have to have massive amounts of training and time for the students to really develop and be able to play in an ensemble, diba? There's really the steep learning curve. It's not I'm not saying that brass and woodwind instruments are easier. It's just that the movements are really quite hard because again, when you are playing, like for example, if you are playing the trumpet, you have to also understand how your embouchure works, and of course working with your hands and fingers to actually press down on the correct notes. But for the violin, your tone production is already 100% a problem if you're just starting out. And of course, uh you know, stopping the strings and the intonation is another problem on its own. So it's really hard to start it from the ground up. So you see a lot of, individual lessons offered for stringed instruments versus a lot of group sessions that you could actually just focus on everyone without them having problems with the instrument kasi with a band, no, with a wind orchestra. You can focus on everyone at the same time because in a string setup, especially if they're all beginners, you will have to focus on tuning their instruments properly and then making sure the pegs don't roll down and making sure that the instruments are well kept. Again, maintenance of the instruments are really, really hard, no, for strings. Even the cheap ones, you can't really say na, oh, mura lang yan, that's okay. No, it's actually very hard. No, uh, what's hard is that every time you keep it inside the case and then you open it up, there is always this slight chance that it's perfectly tuned as you were using it, but that's only like, I don't know, 10% of the time. Most likely it'll be out of tune once you get home and, get the instrument again and practice. So there's a lot of things to really consider, if you want to start from the ground up. That's why a lot of orchestras here take in, more advanced players, string players, diba? It's not like you can build a string orchestra from the ground up in like a single summer, like how bands tend to do lessons with their uh, students, no, because there's really a lot of things that go into it. Yeah. So with regards naman to the keep upkeep of the instruments, aside from how easy it is to take care of certain types of instruments, you can't leave a violin outside. No, that's one thing. You can't leave it in a shed because you need to make sure that not really 100% temperature controlled, but it's out away from the elements. Even a little bit of rain could really affect the way your instrument sounds. And even if you put it in a storage that is, I had a student before, he put his violin in his room, but it was beside the aircon, and AC units develop condensation. So there's a lot of, I don't know, water, but it's never touching the instrument. When he opened the instrument, it was full of mold. So there's a lot of things to really consider. You have to get, at least a humidity or temperature controlled room in order for you to take care of them. Unlike with other instruments, that are made of brass or made of other materials, it's easier to take care of those things. So that's really one of the hardest things about taking care of the violin or any string instruments for that matter. And there's a lot of moving parts as well. Diba? So upkeep is really, I think, the major problem. That's why you don't see a lot. But hopefully, no, as things progress, the arts are getting back into it. Hopefully, they create more orchestras, no. not just professional orchestras, but also community orchestras that would help train up and coming artists and musicians from all over the country, and really uplift the arts here in the communities and of course around the world. No, as Filipinos are really really good in with arts and music. Okay, another thing is, of course, marching bands march, and you can say that to a cellist, no, because they literally need to play while sitting down. And of course, how can you carry around a bass when you're marching? So, uh, string instruments are fairly limited on where they can play and how they can play. So they need uh, a more complex setup, no? Like they need to have proper seats, no? Or they can't really play standing up. Some instruments can't play standing up, or their instruments are too bulky to move around with, no? You can put in a strap on a double bass and bring it around with you. I mean, some people do that, but not a lot of people can do that. No? So that's maybe another thing to consider why there are more marching bands or wind orchestras around the country. But yeah, hoping that there would be a lot more people who could really push through with adding more orchestras, no, just even just community orchestras, just so people are exposed to the orchestra not being like an elitist thing, like that you need to be rich in order for you to perform. The CCP has been reaching out, no, doing concerts around the country as well, bringing orchestras to the provinces so that they understand that, oh, pwede naman pala yun. They could perform in any venue as long as they can sit around. Now, that's the most important thing. All right. So, but I don't want to discourage you from learning the instrument. It's just that that's the reality of it. No, if you want to learn stringed instruments, but of course, learning brass and woodwind instruments and percussion instruments, they're all hard. No, to be honest, nothing comes easy. It's just that you just have to pick which hard is for you. Yeah. So I hope you enjoyed this episode of Usapang Musiko. If you did, please do drop a like, comment down below more content you'd like to see, and of course, subscribe to my YouTube channel, follow me on all my socials, check out, of course, this podcast on Anchor and all major podcast platforms. Check out my Spotify as well. And please do check out Jellynote Play. No, if you wanna practice your skills, whether you're playing in a band, in a marching band, in a wind orchestra, in a symphony orchestra, or you wanna sing, or in a wedding band, or whatever, all instruments can play with Jellynote Play. All right. This has been Ryan Monakil for Usapang Musiko, and I hope to see you soon. Take care and see you on the next one. Peace.